Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Let's talk about the new moon in Taurus, which is approaching in a few days' time. Before I do that, I just want to mention one thing regarding my classes that are coming up. I've put a post out. Many people have seen it and have responded. Thank you to those of you who have responded. So I just want to make something very clear because there seems to be a little bit of confusion. There are two classes, and so there are two dates there. There are dates for New York City, USA time, which is 8:30 p.m. For New York, it's actually the 21st of May, which is a Friday, 8:30 p.m. And then the next class will be on the 22nd of May, 8:30 p.m. on a Saturday. This is for New York, USA time, EDT time zone. And for Melbourne, Australia, it will be the 22nd of May, 10:30 a.m. and the 23rd of May, which is on a Sunday, Melbourne time, 10:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, because we are not on daylight savings at the moment. So New York is summertime at the moment, EDT. So here's the thing. There are obviously four dates there because I'm giving dates for the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, so it's not four classes, it's two classes, which are just going to be running in Australian time on those dates and in USA New York time on the dates that I've given. There are two classes because this particular content is huge. There's a lot of content. It is about Venus. I'm continuing with a Venus series and theme. I started with the Venus Star point late last year. If you're interested in that class, you can purchase the recording if you want to, if you missed that. If you're interested in these classes, it is Venus conjunct all the planets, including Chiron, the four major goddess asteroids, Pallas Athena, Juno, Ceres, and Vesta. Venus conjunct the north of or the south node of the moon. We're also going to look at Venus retrograde at birth and what happens in terms of progressions when she turns stationary direct, because that happens. Okay, you might be born with a Venus retrograde, but at some point in your life she's going to turn direct via progressions, and that's a very important thing to understand. Okay, and also of course unaspected Venus. So as you can see from just the headings that I've given, there's a lot of material there, and there's just impossible to do that in one class. So I've split it up into two classes. So it's part one, part two. Okay, so I just wanted people to be clear about that so there's no confusion at all. So if you are interested, you can just email me directly. My email description and so forth will be in the description box below this video. Okay, I'm glad I got that out of the way. All right, so let's talk about the new moon. I guess before we talk about the new moon, let's just go back a little bit and think about the cycle that we've been in relative to the moon. We just had the full moon in Scorpio 2 weeks ago. That was quite an intense period, I think, for a lot of people. I don't think it was necessarily very easy. Scorpio is not an easy sign. It's one of the most complex signs in the zodiac. I've often said that, and I always will. So when we're dealing with Scorpio energy, we are dealing with a lot of darker shades or darker shadow aspects of ourselves or people or things in our life that we have a connection to or a relationship with, or some kind of connection or relationship. So the Scorpio full moon, because it was a full moon, it naturally expanded and illuminated and highlighted the areas in our life that we needed to look through in a Scorpio through a Scorpio lens, which can bring about a lot of intense emotional complex issues that we feel about certain situations and people in our life. It's also highlighting the things that we have the most resistance to, if you like, because Scorpio and the 8th house corresponds to a lot of our resistances and fears, things that we may resist to change. When we're talking about Scorpio or the 8th house, it's always about transformation and change, and how are we going to implement that transformation and change? How are we going to look at that? How are we going to address that? What are we going to do about it? So, you know, it's been a very intense full moon period, which we've only just kind of, you know, recently sort of started coming out of as the moon has progressed, you know, through the signs past Scorpio, which, you know, when it went into Sag, that's fine. Sag is just such a positive place for the moon. But when it went into Capricorn, of course, while it's been in Capricorn, you know, this has been going on for years. It's been forming this conjunction to Pluto. So every month we have this taste of, you know, moon, Capricorn, Pluto energy, which can just be a really challenging couple of days there every time the moon enters Capricorn. And it does kind of lower the mood a bit as well. You know, Capricorn's just not an upbeat sign. Sagittarius is, on the other hand. So anyway, the moon has moved on, and today is the 7th of May when I'm doing this video, and I think the moon is at, where is it? I think it's in Aries. Yeah, probably just about to go into Aries or towards the end of Pisces. So as the moon continues to progress through, it's going to complete the journey in Aries. It's going to get to Taurus. It's going to reach the sun, and that's when we have the new moon. This new moon is going to be a different feel to the Scorpio full moon that we just had. First of all, Taurus is a much more calmer sign, except when its shadow Scorpio rears its head and you know, it explodes. But generally speaking, Taurus is all about nature, earth, values, self-worth, self-love, practical elements, art, beauty, music, you know, all those sorts of things. Primarily, I think what we're looking at with this new moon is when we sort of bring it into the context of, we've just completed a full moon experience 2 weeks ago in Scorpio, and now we are dealing with the new moon in Taurus. I think it's a really important process for us just to really reflect and assess on what came up for us during the full moon, what we were able to actually honestly look at and see about ourselves, about our life, about our relationships, about everything that's going on in our life, the things that we maybe don't like, maybe don't accept about ourselves, or things that we have a problem with with others, and you know, all this stuff comes up. It's very intense, so it's not lightweight. So whatever's come up during that full moon, this can be a time where you reflect on what were you able to actually release, clear, cleanse, cutting cords. You know, I've had a lot of emails and messages from people making reference to, you know, the Scorpio full moon being such an intense experience where it, you know, it enabled people to cut certain cords with certain connections, interactions in their lives. And a Scorpio full moon can definitely be the advocate for that. Obviously, there would be much deeper things going on in your chart as well that would correspond and, you know, synthesize with that full moon in Scorpio. But whether we transformed something really deep or really significantly or not, we still have the opportunity to now reflect on what came up for us, right? Relative to our emotional connections and emotional attachments and things like that. And what we were able to actually stare straight in the face, that perhaps we are trying to transform in ourselves, right? In Taurus, it's a process and a journey now with the new moon where, upon reflecting on what showed up for us, we can now actually implement or integrate some new ways of doing things. That could be because we've cut off from certain situations or people. That could be because we're setting up, we're just more aware of our own worth and value, what we are ready to really step into relative to. And when we're talking about worth and value, see, that means a lot of things. I mean, at the core, at the absolute core of Taurus is the worth and value that you have of yourself. that no one else can give you, because if you don't give it to yourself, it doesn't matter how much reassurance you get from others, you'll never truly believe it. You have to feel it and believe it within yourself about yourself, right? But we can expand on that and say, well, my worth and value, the way I see that about myself, that includes my time, my energy, what I invest, my time and my energy into, meaning conversations, meaning relationships, meaning connections, meaning work, whatever it may be. Because worth and value comes back to your essence, your core, yourself, and what you are giving back and what you are connecting with. And we all go through different processes and journeys in life where we grow and we develop and we change. So we change certain things, or we adjust certain things, or we completely get rid of things. So new moon in Taurus gives us the opportunity now to at least consider what we would like to integrate into our own system of worth and value based on perhaps what's come up for us during the full moon. So it's really, really important to just reflect on that and think about that. You're not going to see the outcome of that when the new moon arrives in a few days' time. But the new moon is always planting the seed, right? In order to see that flourish really over the whole lunation cycle, which is for 30 days or whatever it is. I'll bring up the chart actually, because we can start to look at a few things in this new moon chart. So again, this chart is drawn for... Am I sharing my screen there? Hang on a minute. Something again just doesn't look right. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, something's lost. What is it? Aha. Sorry guys, I did this last time. I've moved a bar over onto another screen, onto another computer, and for that reason I couldn't see whether I was sharing my screen, and in fact I am. So let's just go back to that. So sorry about that interruption. Okay, so here's the chart for the new moon. This is cast for Melbourne, Australia. So don't worry about the location. As always, this is based on my location. If you want to do a location chart, you will draw the chart up for your actual location. However, again, as I always remind people, when you're wanting to work with this new moon, what you're really wanting to see is, well, where is this new moon in relation to your birth chart? So I'll just grab some little tools here and just highlight some things. So here is the new moon here. 21 degrees and 17 minutes of Taurus. I didn't look up the Sabian symbol actually. I just completely forgot about that. So those Sabian symbol lovers out there, have a look at the 22nd degree of Taurus. That might speak, something very, very clearly and very powerful to you. Sometimes Sabian symbols, I find them, they're a bit of a hit and a miss, but when they hit, boy, they absolutely hit in a very powerful way relative to the description that they give. So for those of you interested in that, you can have a look at that yourselves. Now, where is 21 degrees of Taurus in your chart? That's going to be in obviously a particular house in your chart. It may be aspecting some of your personal planets or a personal planet, or it may be on your ascendant, or it may be aspecting the outer planets. These are things that you obviously need to look at yourself, because I can't see your chart. But it is important to always pay attention to if this new moon lands on any planets in your chart, because it's actually bringing into integration the energy of that planet as well relative to this lunation cycle over the next month. So it's kind of like saying if this new moon was conjunct your Venus, in your sixth house, just to use a hypothetical example, well, then that will be a really wonderful lunation cycle for you to think about things that you want to start relative to work, money, love as well, and more importantly, your own level of self-improvement. What is it that you really want to work on, with this lunation cycle? And what are the sort of values that you want to actually look at relative to your own value system? What is it that you may want to work on at the moment that corresponds to your values and worth, but in a sixth house way, right? Which is basically improving yourself, okay? And it's also work and health as well, right? Just as an example, that's what you would kind of consider at least. Now, this new moon has quite a few aspects to it. It's ruled by Venus because Taurus is ruled by Venus. And we can see here that recently Venus ingressed into Gemini, approaching the North Node in Gemini, and also Mercury ingressed into Gemini as well. And it's very interesting, I suppose, what's kind of going on. I've noticed there's quite a few things happening, publicly in the astrological community with people's personal opinions and perspectives and so forth. And I'm not here to comment about that. It's none of my business really, but I just can't help to um, connect it with, the archetype of Gemini, right? Which is, um, it's actually one's personal opinion. Now, a personal opinion is not necessarily true or false. It may be true to that person, it may be their truth, but it's not the ultimate truth, right? It's a person's personal opinion. That's what Gemini enables us to do, to connect to our thoughts, how we learn, how we communicate, and what is our personal point of view or opinion on a given matter. So there's a lot of Gemini energy that's being activated at the moment, um, which is causing quite a bit of a stir with people's personal opinions and just how diverse they are, or how different they are from one another. And so this is one of the things about the Gemini archetype that a lot of people either miss or just don't understand altogether. Gemini is many things, but one thing it is because it's its own personal opinions, and Gemini being a dual sign representing the twins, representing the left brain, in terms of the zodiac wheel, right? The 12 zodiac signs. When you begin from Aries, and we have a very good example here in this chart because we can see Aries on the ascendant, which is showing us the natural order of the zodiac around the wheel. So Aries is birth, Taurus is knowing that you're here physically, you're starting to connect with your senses, your body. It's like the toddler touching everything, putting things in his mouth or her mouth, and it's the senses being totally, animated, right? The sensory world and organs are totally animated. And Gemini is that first encounter with the mind, speech, language, communication, learning how to speak. When the child, from a toddler, when he starts to learn language, right? That's the Gemini experience. And so the curiosity that exists in the archetype of Gemini is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's always really important to remain curious in life rather than have a set mind and set convictions on everything, because um, I don't think that that helps us to really grow. It's important for us to keep an open mind and to have a curious mind always, regardless of our age, experience, wisdom, etc. So here's where one of the problems comes in with Gemini. It has, because it's the first encounter with language, mind, words, understanding, um, curious about everything, it brings in that whole dual nature of splitting everything up. Okay. So the whole identity, for instance, with this is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white, this is female, this is male, this is night, this is day. This is the absolute epitome of Gemini. That's what Gemini does. It recognizes the opposites of things, the opposite viewpoint, um, that it's one thing or it's that thing, and it has this thing about it where it has to say, well, if this is right, then that is wrong. It splits things up. Gemini is the archetype that um, divides. I mean, I don't, sorry for you people who have respect for your ex-president Trump. I have no opinion about him, but he's a Gemini, right? And just look at the influence he had in with his people. He divided the nation. That's a classic Gemini thing to do. Whether you agree with me or not, it doesn't really matter, because that's not a personal opinion. This is just a fact about the nature of Gemini. So what I'm getting to here is, with all this Gemini energy at the moment, there's a lot of things being stirred up in people's minds, and it's being, communicated on certain public forums or platforms, and it's creating a split. It's splitting people off, right? It's either you're either with that person or you're either with that person. It's a very Gemini thing to do. So the best that we can get out of Gemini is the curiosity, actually. Of course, it connects to intelligence and intellectual ability and learning and all of that. But it's always great to keep a really open mind, I think. So Gemini has stirred some shit up, okay, to put it very simply, in certain communities at the moment, which is just very interesting to observe. Um, and when it comes to one's personal opinion, unfortunately, what generally comes with that, which is a very Gemini thing again, this is my personal opinion and I'm right in my opinion. So in order for me to be right, I have to make you wrong. It's just the nature of Gemini. So I think it's just something that we must be aware of. We must recognize that just because it's my personal opinion, it doesn't mean it's correct for you. It may be correct for me and it may feel truthful for me, and that's okay. But I don't have to assume or expect anybody else to take my personal opinion as the ultimate truth, because it's not. Truth is a pathless land, and truth comes from within. And truth, um, truth doesn't need anything to prove it. It really doesn't. Truth just exists. It exists in nature. It exists in the core essence of life and nature. And you don't have to look very far to find the truth. You have to, I suppose what's challenging is that we have to remove all the BS that's clouding the truth, and that's when we start to come closer to the truth. Now, Gemini is not about truth, it's about ideas and personal opinions. Sagittarius is more the archetype that corresponds to truth, right? The ultimate truth, of course, being Neptune. So, just some things to consider with this, Gemini energy circulating at the moment, with people's thoughts, ideas, personal opinions, all that sort of stuff going on. Also, because Venus is the ruler to this new moon, it's really interesting. We had the Venus star point back in March, right? So that meant that there was a Sun Venus conjunction, and it was an evening star, right? So she remained very close to the sun for quite a long time. She's only just started to move away from the sun, out of the sun's light. So now we can actually see her in the evening sky, right, as she's setting in certain parts of the world, depending on where you are. And so, as she's moving further away from the sun, what that symbolically means is that she's completed her journey in the underworld, which is where she went when she formed the conjunction to the sun, which was the Venus star point in Aries back in March this year, right? So she's moved away from the sun enough now for her light to start re-emerging and shining, which is a very symbolic and important journey, relative to Venus's journey, basically throughout this whole year until the next Venus star point. This only happened really just a few days ago, where she was away from the sun's beams. And I think this is important because this is a new moon in Taurus, and Venus rules the new moon, okay? And now she's away from the sun's beams. So relating to Venus matters in our life, which has to do with love, money, values, friendships, art, beauty, re-evaluating our life from the point of view of what we value in ourselves and what we value in others. You know, Venus has taken us into the underworld for weeks now, enabling us to go through some very deep inner process and journey with that. And now that she's come up out of the underworld, you're going to see, because her light is shining, she's going to show you what you've come to understand about yourself relative to Venus matters in your life. And this new moon is very much a big part of that, because Venus rules this new moon because she's the ruler of Taurus, right? So that's just another thing to consider as well. Gemini is going to, pardon me, Mercury is going to go retrograde. When is it going retrograde? I've just forgotten the date. Okay, let me just stop share and just check something out. Yeah, 30th of May. Okay, so Venus goes retrograde on the 30th of May. I'll just share my screen again. Get that chart back up. So the new moon is on the 11th and 12th of May, and Mercury will go retrograde on the 30th of May. And so what's going to happen is we're about to step into eclipse season as well. And the first eclipse is going to be a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius in May. What was the date for that? Actually, I can do this without stopping share. So 26th of May is the first lunar eclipse for this year, which is at 5 degrees of Sag, and it'll be followed by a solar eclipse, which is on the 10th of June, which is at 19 degrees of Gemini. And I will come back and talk about those. But the point being that just after this new moon cycle, we're stepping into eclipse season, and at the same time, Mercury is going to go retrograde. And it is going to, down the track, end up forming a square to Neptune. And I've spoken about that briefly, suggesting that that can be a very tricky time when it comes to communication, verbal interaction, written or spoken word contracts. You're signing contracts, reading letters. Just a basic example, you may have received a document from some kind of professional establishment that relates to your personal circumstances. Before you actually just rush into signing it off and handing it back, I would highly recommend that you read the fine print. I think we should do that always anyway, but it's not something that a lot of us do. Even I don't do that. I can't be bothered. But Mercury Neptune can create a lot of, it can be blatant deception, dishonesty, or it can be just your own ability, or inability rather, to be able to discern and see clearly the truth of the document, the words, or what's being communicated to you, because Neptune is that fog, that mist where we can't see clearly, right? So when that happens, that's going to be a few important days there. And let me just see when that is actually. So there it is there. So it's around the 23rd of May. Okay, that's when there's a square to Neptune. So I'd really be watching those days around there regarding, as I said, documentation and verbal agreements and things like that. Okay, the other things that I want to address here is that this new moon is forming a conjunction to Uranus. It's fairly wide, but it's still a conjunction. There is a square to Saturn that's wide, but not too wide. And there's also a square to Jupiter. And there's also a trine to Pluto. So they're the main, so all the big guns, as I like to call them, they are all making very significant aspects to this new moon. The closest one being the trine from Pluto, which is really reassuring actually, because Pluto, which corresponds to our evolutionary path, our soul, what we're seeking to um, evolve relative to our soul's desires. So Pluto is actually supporting this new moon. The energy of Pluto is forming a trine. So it's saying, let me give you a bit of a leg up. Let me give you a bit of assistance relative to any transformational work that you're actually trying to implement at the moment, especially around your values, your set of values, and what that means for you, what that looks like for you, how you frame that in your life. As I said before, relative to how you give your energy, your time, who you're communicating with, how you're sharing your life. What are you sharing about your life, who with, etc., etc. Pluto trine the new moon's just a very, very nice, soft kind of energy. If not that Pluto is soft, far from it, the complete opposite. But if you if we want to feel um, a less cataclysmic energy from Pluto, then it would be from a trine aspect. Trine is always about support, flowing, and it's also about the right timing for things to unfold as well. Okay. The square from Jupiter and Saturn's a bit of a different story. I'm not too concerned with the square from Jupiter. Squares from Jupiter to the Sun or the Moon, in this case, it's both, are not really a big problem. They could actually, the square from Jupiter just really gives a lot of energy to that new moon. So there's also that element of Jupiter, which is about faith, confidence, expansion, abundance. So it's perhaps it's perhaps feeling the energy of the new moon with really having some big idea around something you're trying to start up in your life at the moment, or just certain things that you are reassessing about your goals and your values as well. Jupiter's going to actually help, even though it's in a square, because Jupiter both square to the Sun or the Moon is just not a difficult aspect, really. The only difficult thing that could arise would be that you're shooting too far, you're reaching too far for something at the moment where you may need to just pull back a bit. That's the if you want to call it a downside, that would be the only downside. The square from Saturn adds a different edge. We know that Saturn's a very challenging planet. It's got to do with this consensus reality, and it is squaring this new moon. So there is something there that's going to bring in a bit of tension around, I suppose it's probably going to be around our own personal set of values, Taurus, new moon in Taurus, and the consensus reality and the structure of that around us at the moment, and perhaps what we're trying to do. It may come up as a sense of limitations, certain limitations. It may come up as you have to kind of be more patient. You have to wait a little bit before you take that step a little bit further with what you're trying to implement with this new moon. Um, yeah, Saturn squares, it's probably the most awkward aspect in this whole new moon. The Uranus is great because that speaks to individuation. It speaks to liberation, freedom, authenticity. Now, Uranus was opposite the full moon a couple of weeks ago, so Uranus is quite a big player in this, in the lunation cycle we've just been through, and in this new lunation cycle we're about to step into. Uranus has a very powerful voice, and it is in Taurus as well. So this is really about breaking free from old values, old attachments. See, again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Taurus is the most fixed sign of all the fixed signs. It is the most resistant to change. It doesn't like change. That's not a personal opinion. That's a fact about Taurus. It's just the nature of Taurus. So, with Taurus, we can we can become very aware of our own security and resources, comforts, sensual delights and appetites, and the comfort that we either have around that or are seeking around that, And that's fine if we can do that in the way that, and I'll quote Krishnamurti again. He said, somebody could give him a $500,000 vehicle today, and he would like absolutely love that and enjoy it. And if they said to him tomorrow he would have to return it, he would be able to do that easily. That's called non-attachment. So Taurus is a sign that corresponds to attachment. And so here with Uranus, Uranus is saying to us, we've got to learn to become more detached with our life possessions, the things that we try to accumulate and create and develop and control and hold on to. We've got to come into this new moon with a Uranus level of energy to it. And that would be to have a more objective, detached perspective on whatever it is you're deciding to do with this new moon. So that might look like, okay, so I've been reflecting on um, these sorts of things that I really hold greatly in my life, that I really absolutely love and value. But something around that at the moment is showing me that I need to maybe let go a bit. I need to maybe detach a little bit instead of trying to hang on to it and control it. Because the truth is that we can't control anything. We think we can and we want to, and that's human nature. But in truth, we have very little control, if any at all. The fact is that 85% of our behavior is dominated by the unconscious component within us. So everything that you do on an everyday basis is just a little iceberg, in the ocean. The sea underneath all that is everything else that's um, directing your life, as it were. So we don't really have control. We like to think we have control. Um, there are different levels of control, I guess, from the point of view of there's control that comes out of sheer insecurity and fear, which is the inability to go with the flow and be detached and just let life be what it's going to be. And then there's control that comes in from a more, what I would consider a more conscious level, that corresponds to your life, not life out there, not anybody else out there. Because if we think we can control anybody out there or what's going on out there, we are greatly misled. The only thing that we can control to some extent is our own responses to the things that show up. We can have some measure of control over that relative to the choices we make around that. That's where we've got control and power. But anything outside of that has got nothing to do with you. It's like Eckhart Tolle says, leave life alone. That's none of your business. It's very hard to adopt that kind of mental attitude. And it's a very Aquarian attitude. And Eckhart Tolle is an Aquarian, by the way. And Aquarius has this, extraordinary ability to see, first of all, the bigger picture of humanity, and also to be incredibly detached. And for that reason, Aquarius often it will be accused as being aloof, not interested, doesn't care, not sensitive. And that's not true at all. It's absolutely not true. It's just simply that Aquarius has the ability to be so objective and stand back and actually look at the whole cosmos as opposed to its own personal self-centered view or perspective. That would be Leo, operating at a lower level, let's say, right? At the highest level, Leo is the most glorious, beautiful sign, resonating from the heart, so passionate, right? So, there are shadow sides to every sign. So, yeah, Uranus. Uranus is a big, big, big player in this new moon. Um, Uranus, just one thing about Uranus, one other thing. When we're not able to, how can I put it? Embrace, I suppose would be a good word. When we're not able to embrace the Uranus impulse or energy, then Uranus is experienced as a shock factor. that's why Uranus is the planet that corresponds to things that are sudden, unpredictable, and provoke shock. And the reason for that is because an individual may just be so out of touch with the Uranian energy in their life, because that would mean that they are really in touch with the Saturn energy. And so Uranus comes along, it swoops through, and it creates a little mini tornado in the person's life and shocks the person out of whatever it is they're in order to see from a much bigger picture view. So Uranus is not an easy energy, especially when we're not aligned with it in some kind of way, which means to be more detached and more objective, right? And Taurus, as I said, is it's certainly not objective and it's certainly not detached. It's not the nature of Taurus to be that. But with Uranus forming this conjunction to this new moon, it's giving us that chance and that opportunity to integrate the Uranian impulse through this lunation cycle, which is about, yeah, having a look at our own values and really examining our own sense of self-worth and self-love. And also being able to be objective and detached about that as much as we can be with the nature of Taurus, right? So, but I think the ultimate thing with this new moon is the transformation that can occur with the trine from Pluto and the Uranus conjunction, which speaks to really being able to just let go of old paradigms, old models, things that you've been attached to perhaps for a very long time, that you are struggling to free yourself from. And so Uranus comes in and says, here's your chance. You can do this with the Uranian frequency right there with the new moon. The other thing, and I'll just finish up there, is that the esoteric ruler to Taurus is actually Vulcan. Now, some of you may not have heard of Vulcan. Vulcan is this red arrow that you see right here in the chart. I'll just grab some drawing tools. So this is Vulcan here. Okay, so the reason this is always in my charts, as you may have noticed, many are wondering what the hell is that red arrow? That is Vulcan. Vulcan is always very, very close to the sun for any of you, no matter what time you were born, no matter what month, year, location. Okay, Vulcan is a body that is used just like every other planet that we use, the same significance and power. It is used in esoteric astrology when you're looking at a chart from an esoteric level. And Vulcan corresponds to what's called ray number one, which is ruled by Pluto and Vulcan. Ray number one. There are 7 rays. Ray number one, which is the ray of willpower, and it corresponds to Pluto and Vulcan. In terms of rulership with signs, Vulcan actually rules Taurus, which in our normal model of astrological thinking sounds totally bizarre. You know, it's hard to get your head around that. But I've studied esoteric astrology for many, many years. And so for me, it seems fairly natural, right? So just very quickly to give you a little bit of insight of what that means. Because Taurus, as I was saying, is an archetype that corresponds to attachment and the challenge to be able to be detached, right? Vulcan, who was the alchemist, he was this character in mythology who worked in an underground type of dungeon, right, where he basically created the most extraordinary metals and things. He was an alchemist, right? He was a wizard, you know. He was a genius, but he was removed from the gods in the upper world. You know, he just wasn't beautiful and, you know, all that aesthetic sort of stuff, right? And Venus broke his heart, by the way, as in the goddess Venus. Anyway, that's another story. But when we're looking at Vulcan, it's the work that we do behind the scenes. So the reason I'm bringing up Vulcan, it's always next to the sun anyway. So that's neither here nor there unless you're working with your chart esoterically. But Vulcan in this new moon chart is so powerful because it's right there with the new moon and Uranus, and it is the ruler of Taurus in esoteric astrology. So this speaks to really, really serious, intense transformation on yourself if you really want to go there on that level. It's the ability to break those old attachments and move forward with a greater sense of liberation and freedom, Uranus. I mean, I'm sure all of you who are listening have gone through some process or journey or experience in your life where you've completed something, right? You've finished it and you've freed yourself from it. That can be a relationship, that can be a job, that can be a habit, it can be a number of different things. But when you have that experience of freeing yourself up, actually freeing yourself up from something that kind of had chains on you, as it were, there's nothing more exhilarating and liberating than that. And that's not something that the world can give you. That's something that you can give to yourself by actually detaching from that thing or person or whatever it is that you are ready to do that with. So Vulcan is extremely powerful with this new moon. And I love the Vulcan energy because I love transformative energy work. I love That's why I love Pluto so much, and Scorpio, and just dealing with that energy. Um, I'm not saying I'm not attached to things. I have numerous attachments, probably too many, too many to count. But I do my best, as much as I can to release as many attachments as I can. And I've done that in very profound ways over the last few years of my life because it all comes back to my dad leaving this world. Once my dad left this world, that there was nothing you could take away from me that could bring me that level of pain again. I just know that in my heart and soul. So when you encounter that kind of death, then you suddenly have this realization that there is no death, actually. We people understand that from an intellectual level, that especially people um, who believe in reincarnation and so forth, which I know a lot of you do. I certainly do. You have this intellectual understanding that, yeah, I've had previous lives, and this is another lifetime, and we kind of get that to some extent intellectually, but we need to get that more intuitively. Right brain, left brain is the kind of trying to rationalize that, which you can't rationalize something like that because that brings in the element of non-linear time. And the way our brain is designed, it's generally designed to work with the concept of linear time, past, present, future, right? But in truth and in soul levels and realms, there is no such thing as time. This whole past, present, future thing doesn't even exist. But here in the physical, we have that sort of um, definition or relationship or connection to life. That's how we kind of identify things, right? That's the world of Saturn. So yeah, when you're working with very deep processes within yourself that are around Pluto, Scorpio, Vulcan type of matters, it's a very private experience, and it's not something that just anybody can understand. um, it's very deep. It's the dark night of the soul that goes on and on and on and on and on, because it's a process. It just doesn't happen overnight, right? And so, I mean, for me personally, when I go through these kinds of journeys, which I'm still going through, it's just transformed to a different level now, as opposed to 4 years ago when my father transcended. Where I was then and where I am now is two very different ends of the spectrum, right? But still, I've got a long way to go with that process of working through that and the healing and all sorts of things. And it's a very private journey, and if not, I'm speaking about it publicly in very minimal ways. I'm just giving some context to help us understand the whole very deep journey of transformation, and how full moons and new moons and things like that are such important cycles relative to these deeper and much bigger things that are going on in our life that have been going on for some time. And so the new moons and the full moons act as, massive activation points and trigger points. Not always, it doesn't have to be massive, but it can be quite a trigger point. So yeah, just something else to think about there. Um, and finally, the new moon being in Taurus, it's a little bit more grounding, than the full moon in Scorpio we just had, which was a whirlwind of very intense emotions that have been projected all over the place and have brought up all sorts of things for all sorts of individuals. And just one other thing that I know you guys will appreciate for sure. This new moon, it's not at this degree that I'm about to mention, but just for those of you who are not aware, there are particular degrees in the zodiac that correspond to musicians, dancers, and artists, but more specifically musicians and dancers, right? Singers. And the degrees of those are 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So from 16 degrees to 20 degrees of Taurus, if you have any planets in those degrees, it would not surprise me at all if you are a dancer or you're musical or you play an instrument or you're a singer, right? They are the strongest degrees relative to musicians, dancers, and singers in the sign of Taurus. And that comes from this book here. Okay, it's called Degrees of the Zodiac by Donna Walter Henson. I have shown this book before. And so this woman has clearly done extensive research. And so what she's done is she's covered every single degree of the zodiac, very much like the Sabian symbol books, right? Looking at the whole 360 degrees, which covers the 12 signs of the zodiac, right? And each degree, so each sign equals 30 degrees in the tropical zodiac, right? So the first 30 degrees of Aries, she'll go through the whole 30 degrees of Aries from 1 to 30. And she will correspond each degree to what talents or challenges or difficulties or gifts or whatever it is that it corresponds to. And so what I'm saying is that with Taurus, the degrees 16 to 20 are very prominent in the charts of people who are musicians, singers, and dancers. And I've looked at that myself, so I'm not just taking her word for it. I have actually looked at many people's charts, and it seems to actually correspond 100%. So whilst this new moon is beyond those degrees, it was just a reminder to me, because even though there's a lot of complexities around this new moon and some challenges as well, we must also come back to the simplicity of Taurus as well. The more simple, beautiful, um, earthy earthiness of Taurus, which is Gaia, Mother Nature, the simple things in life, just having an appreciation for the most basic and simple things. Taurus at the other end of the spectrum is the accumulation of money and wealth and material things, and it doesn't matter how much it has, it can never have enough. That's Taurus out of control. But Taurus in a more conscious state is the Taurus that has a real love, appreciation, and resonance for Mother Earth, for nature, and can actually let go of attachments. That's the highest level of Taurus. You see, that's why esoterically Taurus is a very spiritual sign. And that's why it's ruled by Vulcan, because Vulcan is assisting Taurus to break those attachments down, let go, and become more free. And that's fundamentally what this new moon is about. So I'm going to leave it there. I think I've covered enough for us to think about. Yep, so eclipses coming up, as I said, and I'll be doing some videos for those. Personally, I'm looking forward to this new moon because that full moon in Scorpio, it was really, it wasn't very comfortable. Um, it did kind of show some things to me that I had to look at more closely myself as well. Um, and I went through a process where I sort of withdrew from the world, which I do that a lot. You know, I've got very strong Pluto in my chart. Pluto aspects everything in my chart, so I tend to go through these withdrawal sort of cycles quite a bit. And because I'm lots of Aquarian energy, I detach a lot, and it's hard for people to understand that. You know, people have so many judgments and personal opinions on what they think you are or what they think you're doing or not doing, and you know, assumptions and shit like that, basically. And what I want to say is that you just don't know. You don't know what somebody is going through. You know, you're going through your shit. Everyone's going through their own stuff. So you know, let's just pull back on the personal opinions on people's stuff, right, and journey, because you know what, everyone's doing the best they can to their best capability. And finally, truth always shines. It doesn't need to be proven. Like I said before, it's just about removing the layers of BS that have accumulated over the beautiful truth of what is. And no amount of control and money and manipulation can hide the truth, especially from people who are awake and in touch with the truth. And the way to do that is to go inside yourself and turn off the TV, perhaps. See you soon, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching, and see you soon in my Venus class. I'm so excited for those of you that are joining. It's starting to fill up pretty quickly. I've got quite a few on board already. So if you are interested, you know, get onto it as soon as you can, because I'm not gonna, even though I can have, you know, 200 people in that class relative to the capacity of what Zoom enables me to do, it's just too much. I don't want that. You know, I want to kind of reasonable size group. Um, yeah, so that's what I'm aiming for, and I'll see you guys soon. It's going to be a juicy class, and yeah, lots of things to learn and cover. So I look forward to that, and see you soon. Bye.